What if I told you that blood isn't just, well, blood? What if it's also a spiritual contract, a living, breathing hard drive, and maybe even the blueprint for our entire technological future? In this explainer, we're going to dive into a framework that completely reimagines blood, looking at it as a medium for covenant, a carrier of code, and a mind-blowing form of advanced technology. All right, let's kick things off with a pretty wild question. What if every single drop of blood in your veins was actually a library? And I don't mean just any old library. I'm talking about one that holds more data than all the world's computers combined. Yeah, I know, it sounds like something straight out of sci-fi, but believe it or not, this idea is the key to everything we're about to unpack.
So to really get a handle on this, we've got to look at blood in a new way. It's not just one thing. Think of it as a living archive that has three totally distinct but deeply connected identities.
Okay, first up, we have this idea of blood as a covenant, like a sacred promise or a contract that can't be broken. If you look back at ancient traditions and theologies, blood was way more than just a biological fluid. It was treated like sacred ink, the very thing you use to seal unbreakable promises, forge relationships, and even find forgiveness. The source material presents it as the ultimate way to bind one life to another. Next, we've got the identity of code. And this is where that ancient, kind of spiritual idea smashes right into modern biology. See, your blood is basically a living information superhighway. It's constantly circulating these little fragments of DNA and RNA, which creates a real-time log of what's happening inside your body. It's like a diagnostic report that's always updating for every single cell.
And that brings us to the third identity, the archive. This is where we see that amazing bridge between biology and technology. It turns out that the DNA that's floating around in our blood is now recognized as, get this, the most efficient information storage medium that we know of, period. It's the ultimate hard drive, and it was designed by nature.
So just how good is this storage? Well, a single gram of DNA, that's a tiny amount, can theoretically hold over 200 petabytes of data. To give you some perspective, that is way more information than you'd find in every single digital library on the entire planet. We're out here building these gigantic, power-guzzling data centers when a far superior archive is already flowing in every drop of our blood.
Okay, so if blood is a type of code, what does that mean for other areas of life? Like justice? Let's dig into that by comparing two very different legal systems, one that's described in the source as divine, and the other, well, that's our modern human system.
This table really lays it all out, and it's a fascinating contrast. On one side, you have ancient law, like what's described in the Torah. The source presents this as being restorative. If you messed up, the outcome was a covenant, a lifelong bond that was meant to provide for and restore you. Now compare that to our modern law, which is framed as being punishative. Today, the same kind of acts can lead to exile, prison, and a permanent digital mark on your record that follows you everywhere. So one system is trying to restore, and the other is using data to condemn.
And this whole restorative versus punitive idea, it doesn't just apply to legal systems. It bleeds right over into our technology, especially in how we store information. Let's really look at the difference between nature's design and our own attempts to copy it.
I mean, the difference in efficiency here is just staggering. In one corner, you have DNA storage. It's unbelievably dense. It can last for thousands of years, and it literally copies itself. And in the other corner, are data centers. These massive buildings gobble up megawatts of power, take up acres and acres of land, and they're basically obsolete in a few decades. It's a pretty stark choice between a living, permanent archive and one that's constantly decaying.
All right, now we're going to take a little detour into something a bit more symbolic within this framework. The source material points to the number 19 as a kind of hidden code, a cipher. It's presented as this invisible thread connecting the physical act of cutting a covenant, shedding blood, with these more abstract ideas like virtue and intelligence.
So here's the breakdown that the source gives us. In some biblical indexes, the number 19 points to the Hebrew word for sword, which is the tool you'd use to cut a covenant. Then in Greek, that same number is linked to the word for virtue, or moral excellence. And just to connect it all, in Sanskrit, the word asi literally means sword. So the argument here is that this isn't just random. It's a deliberate connection between the physical act and the spiritual result.
So, if our blood is a living archive that we can read, then the next big question has to be, can we write to it? And this is where we get into the most futuristic part of this whole framework, the idea of blood as a medium for programmable healing and maybe even programmable evolution. The key idea here is to totally reframe how we think about viruses. Forget seeing them as just these agents of disease. What if we could see them as programmable nanites? I mean, a virus is really just a little package designed to deliver genetic code. So what if we could reprogram them? What if we could get them to deliver healing instructions? Just imagine them circulating in your blood, finding and patching corrupted genetic code, like the kind that causes cancer, basically debugging our bodies from the inside out.
And it doesn't just stop at healing, not by a long shot. The next step, according to this thinking, would be using these viral nanites to install new features, literally borrowing from nature's massive library of abilities. Can you imagine programming the DNA for an owl's night vision right into our own eyes? Or what about giving ourselves a salamander's power to regenerate limbs? Or even a tardigrade's insane resistance to radiation? All of it delivered like a simple software update through our bloodstream.
Now, to bring its whole vision together, the source material uses the symbol of the rainbow to draw a really sharp contrast. It presents one view of the rainbow as a sign of a divine covenant, one that was sealed in sacrifice. It then puts that right up against the modern pride flag, which it describes as a counterfeit symbol of human pride. But then the source proposes a third, true rainbow, the literal arcs of light that you can actually see in our own blood plasma. The suggestion is that there's a covenant hidden right inside of us.
Really, when you boil it all down, the entire argument comes back to this one powerful quote from the source. Where man encodes exile into databases, God encodes covenant into DNA. That single sentence just perfectly sums up the whole framework, the contrast between our temporary, punitive systems and what's presented as a permanent, restorative code written into the fabric of life itself.
So after looking at blood as a covenant, as code, and as an archive, we're left with this one big, final question to think about. Is our own biology the ultimate blueprint for our technology? And maybe, just maybe, should we be looking inward to the living code that's already flowing through our veins to find the answers to our greatest challenges?